Okay, let's see if we can, I screwed something up. These guys have to go in. Try to assess what's happened so far in the turn. I'm about halfway through. The economic trend was -1, which I forgot to apply. So actually everybody's back a buck, and unfortunately everybody except Russia. Unfortunately, that means I spent a point of research I shouldn't have on the French. What would I have put that on? Actually, that was an extra point in armor. I put 2 points in armor this turn for some reason. One of the points was because of a spy event that they had here. Okay. The Russians, I have to figure out when their units come in. That's somewhere in the rule book. These will get spaced out along the turns when they're going to show up as new reserves there. They built a military factory. They can't build more civilian factories. Germany and Britain and France all upped their civilian factory totals. This is particularly useful for France. I mean, France could have used the military factory, but they don't really want to do that because they get $2 for a civilian factory, plus they get their research jet, which they thought they were going to use, but whatever. So after figuring out the income, the big thing was the production, the factories. By the way, I'm not sure what these counters are for. From what I can tell, you get a 1-turn counter, which you take from the opposing player if you defeat them and force them to back down. So I'm not sure what these are for yet, but there are a lot of counters in this game that aren't well defined in terms of use. So maybe these were intended for those 1-turn usages. I don't know. The Axis counters that are similar to them in color, for example, the Rhineland, if you take that territory, if you take the aggression and get that territory, you end up getting the bonus. So maybe there's a concomitant bonus which goes to the Allies for the same things, where they get, hey, the Axis has done something major, we're going to react more. I haven't looked into it that deeply to try to see if that's the case. Anyway, for the research itself, let's take a look at what we're foaming along with. The Germans got a bonus in airplanes, in jets, for example, which they took, so they've spread out. And you can see, there's a certain balance to what you're doing across here. With the Allies, same thing. And the Russians are slowly creeping forward with their research. There's not really a lot to say about that. There's not a lot to this game. In terms of production, we have that military factory meant that there's some mobilization, which I have to account for, and I'll do that offline. The Brits managed to... what did they do? No, the Italians managed to have enough money left over to pay to launch a ship. That's marked here, and then there's little ship markers here. So that changes the balance of power, and now it's even, which maybe means there's a chance of going into the Rhineland or Ethiopia or something, but I don't know. I'm scared as hell. I thought those were automatics the first time I played it, and it seems like, I'm just misreading the formatting of the rules and that they're not. So yeah, I think that's about it really, as to where we are, I think. We come to one of those weird things, the anti-common turn, and I kind of caught this in my head. We got the Russians built set up there. And by the way, the ships that didn't get paid for just get pushed down to the next turn. This is the same mechanism that's in play in World at War. It took me a while to figure out what they were saying in there. Knowing it from there, I didn't spend much effort here. But here we've got a problem. So the three conditions. First, a bordering country that contains the most Russian flags. Well, none of them that border Russia contain any Russian flags. Okay. So the next step is, if no bordering country contains any Russian flags, a bordering country with no flags. Well, there are none of those. They all have flags in them. And then we go to, if all bordering minor countries contain Axis flags. Well, that's not the case. Then the bordering minor country that contains the fewest Axis flags. Well, my guess is that second category was supposed to be Axis flags, so we'll go into Poland there. Oops. Oh, shit. Okay, France gets that. France had more money coming to them, because I didn't see this. This was from last turn. I forgot I did this. They have 2 of these points here. So they had this, which means they're actually up a buck. And that buck would pay for that research that they wanted to do. And I'll mark that sucker down. Anyway, we're in the midst of the diplomacy. I'm trying to figure out if anybody has money to do any. Italy certainly has some cash. If there was something they could turn quickly, they would. All of the events have been turned except a Russian one. Russia has some cash, so they may be able to drop a couple of points into somewhere and try to change things as well. It looks to me like I failed with the French. I shouldn't have been able to put their military counter in play. Let's put the German marker back here in the Rhineland. There's no economic advantage to the Rhineland, but there's an advantage to being able to take the Rhineland. I might have been able to take it last turn, given that, but whatever. It turns out I didn't read the French military counter totally. I guess I looked at restrictions instead of here. They can place a military counter if the Allies have balance of power advantage. These sound like restrictions to me, and France has a positive support level, but the restriction is that they can only place it in Rhineland, Belgium, Luxembourg, whatever. Anyway, quickly jumping around, trying to use the rule book as a reference. It doesn't work that way either. It's much, much less painfully inadequate as a reference, about equivalent to a poorly written, verbose, normal rule book, than it is as something that you would actually, use to try to learn the rules to the game. So if you already kind of know the rules, you can use it. If you've memorized all the rules, you don't need the rule book, so it won't harm you at all. So if you've memorized every modifier and every rule in this game, if you're one of those total addicts who's like, plays one game, say a World at War, and then you're going to extend to this other game because it adds something, i.e. maybe you're one of those people who spends much of your time on their Yahoo group discussing the one game that you're interested in. Hey, maybe this rule book works for you because you don't have to open it up, right? Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so I don't remember where I am, but I think I'm on Italy, trying to decide if they have any value to doing any diplomatic actions. We pretty much move into the fall turn without anything much happening. You can see the anti-common turn somehow worked against France and Poland. I think I'm doing that correctly. Italy slipped into Albania. Russia managed to remove Finland using a random event, I guess. And I think we're set there. One thing that worries me about this is the victory level is based on many of the things that kind of affect the ability to conduct aggressions. Things like, balance of power, right? Maybe support level. Yeah. And the victory level expects that, if this game is balanced, you'll be within 2 points at the end of the game. What's kind of weird about all that is, well, you kind of have to be above that 2-point difference, essentially, as far as I can tell, to be able to do an aggression. At least the way I read the rules. If you take a chance at something less than that, you're going to end up, even in something like the Rhineland with almost no resistance, you're going to end up sparking a war. Maybe I'm not getting these thresholds that aren't really explained. Maybe I am. I don't know. But either way, it seems, if I am getting an understanding of how this is working, it seems to me that you know, the Germans aren't expected to do as well as they did historically by any means. Maybe the random events bake things in and cause some things to happen differently than they would otherwise. Maybe the larger, the military factories up here are likely to generate more points, so the Germans do more historically accurate results. But if that's the case, well, it looks to me like the victory levels are not going to be at all close to, balanced, as it were. So, who knows? Maybe it's worth the risk. Italy cannot declare war on Ethiopia because they're at 1 point to begin with, which means Ethiopia has a defensive point, which it'll add to France's 0 and Italy's 0, and we end up at war with France. Britain had a -1 due to an event, so they're not entering the war. I don't know what that means. If the war starts with just Britain in it or something, that factors into this. I don't have no idea what that would mean. But France has a pretty big army, almost as big as Germany's, or maybe as big. Yeah, it looks like it's as big now. But what about the Rhineland? Let's reconsider the Rhineland. The Rhineland's base value is 0. I've got -2 on it here. And Britain would have another -1. So there's no chance Britain can enter the war. France could start the war if they draw a 3. That's how I judge it. Now, by the sequence, I don't know when you determine the defensive value of the country. Let's see if that's spelled out anywhere in this. Well, let's look at the fucking chart, because, of course, this probably doesn't tell us. Step 1, we announce an aggression. Okay, so the random tile is going to be drawn in the axis response. Basically, Germany could take what I think is a 1/3 chance of just losing the game outright by starting the war, and by the war starting in 35, when they're totally unprepared for it. That's going to cause them nothing but problems, right? And this would be really, really silly, but it would be very nice to get this extra factory over here from the Rhineland. Yeah, those are the additionals. La. All right. We're going to try. I'd say we want to go for it. No. So we're in the position we were in. We don't want to take that risk. We're going to wait to militarize the Rhineland until we're sure we can get away with it. The disadvantage to that, of course, is there's a 2/3 chance that if France does try to intervene here and pushes it to the limit to the Axis response, that they're going to have to pull back from their ultimatum. There are no penalties for them just responding, but there are penalties for them letting it go to the Axis response and then withdrawing after that. And they'd be forced to 2/3 of the time. So that's what was kind of appealing about it, but Germany decided not to go for it. Good enough. Again, because I'm playing solitaire, I fiddle around a little bit with how the actual events are played out. Not in a big way, but to begin with, we have an economic trend -1, and we're going to have a bunch of diplomatic factors. Finland is going to go pro-Axis by a point. Russia is going to go pro-Allied by a point. And then we have a point of European aggression in play. I guess I don't actually need this. I could just doink this over. Again, there's no there's no description of how you're supposed to represent or handle these different charts, so I'm not really sure what to do with them. But what I'm kind of cheating on, Germany, for example, here has a support level of -2, +1 for each intelligence research result. Well, they don't have any results yet. It's too early in the game. So I'm just putting this marker here. Now, theoretically, nobody should know this. And I'll flip this up. Likewise, the Russian event gives a Russian support of -3, which would be improved if they had economic prep. That could go up, and I'm not sure this is even possible. So again, I'm not sure the rules are working with what I'm playing. Economic prep, they say each each level of economic prep. Oh, levels are 2 steps or whatever. So if I had some economic prep here, I could actually reduce that, and that could go up to a total where this card is actually a +3. We've seen a few of these cards before, where if they come in later in the war, they're gonna, or later in the game, they're gonna actually bolster countries. But at this point, they're just gonna hurt support levels because nobody can possibly have the research in place to get a positive effect from them. Yeah, there we go. That's how we have to pick up the cards. We have to squeeze them. The French one is, the French one is Allied covert operations +1 level. I wish they recorded everything in steps or levels or something, but in this case, that's going to be 2 research marks essentially when we come to the research step of things. Anyway, if I can remember it, I may just end up putting 1. And who knows if I've, done that right with all the others. I can't look through and try to figure it out. So anyway, we'll hit the income and see what we get out of it. We do have a bad economic climate, so I got to remember to give people penalties there. But nobody should have any random effects on their income anymore. Why is the English income at -1? Oh no, it's not. It's at 0. Okay, I can't read. As you can see, there's been a little bit more militarization. We're at the end of the turn here. The Germans still don't have enough points in their favor to, especially with the aggression index in place, to occupy the Rhineland. By my point count, I'm at -1 here. This gets me to +1 for Germany, right? But the balance of power is against me, which brings me down to 0. And Britain's at a +1, so conceivably Britain could actually go into the Rhineland. In fact, with the balance of power shifted that way, if France only had a support point, they could start throwing their military into the Rhineland, preventing the Germans from ever occupying it, maybe. Germany's kind of at the, well, I better start marking these up. In terms of research, we're seeing some advances there. See, the Germans are actually filling up the things they're most interested in, as are the Italians, which is a problem because now it means they're not going to be able to put their points freely into those sectors. Likewise, the Russians, they're only going to be able to, they'll put 1 point, has to go in that first 3 section. I'm sorry. I guess it's the first 5 for them. And their second point, though, can go anywhere. So they're entering this gray, I don't think is a problem for them, but I'm not sure. It looks like the dividing lines are here, but the color doesn't quite match. Is that different from these? Yeah, I'm going to have to look in the rules because these are not representing the way I expected them to. I thought it was the first 6, second 6, third 6. But the way the cutoffs are, this is the first 5, then the next 7, and then the rest. So I don't know. But I'll worry about that bridge when I cross it, right? We do have a French flag in Russia, which means France is getting some sort of diplomatic ties with Russia. And that gives them, Russia, a penalty to their support level, which is kind of, dicky. But that just came from an event, so not much I can do about it. Now, I wouldn't remember that except I had noticed it, which is always a key problem. Is, you know, I knew to look it up in here. It's described in there sort of, only for Italy, but whatever. But unless you kind of remember what all the counters are, you're not going to have, and what affects them, you're not going to remember to look them up. There's no easy tie between, oh yeah, I got a flag in Russia. Okay, so what? You know, unless it's already baked into your head somehow. Okay, here we are in the winter of 35, and our economic trend is positive, which is a real bonus in income for Germany and England. People aren't converting factories over. Everybody's got their civilian factories already converted that they can, and the military factories, well, next turn they get a point cheaper, plus the EIA is back at 0 now. It was a point cheaper last turn, which convinced some people. There are people who want to. The Germans, for example, want to convert one over. Although it's not that big a deal until I get the Rhineland factory, because I won't get the support bonus. I've already grabbed one. What else? Anyway, that gives us more money. Russians had a military purge, which means, you know, last turn they ran out their money, so they couldn't buy a military unit when they had to. I don't know if they did that legitimately. Because they were required to buy a unit, and I think they ran out their money during the research step, which appears to come before, but doesn't actually come. It's simultaneous with the military step, but I can't undo stuff. Their purge level is still quite low, of course. I mean, we're so early. We're in 35, right? But the thing is, there's less turns in this game than in WIF, but it feels like things are developing more slowly, maybe because I'm just trying to get used to the game. Because it should move pretty quickly. There isn't a lot going on here. We got some additional income for the Russians, and they also have a support level from their factory, so, you know, it's all kind of working out. But what I wanted to talk about was the research. So I did look this up, and it's what I kind of remembered. These don't correlate with any columns that they're set up with. The white is for the white column, the 3 white columns. The pale gray is for the 3 pale gray, and the dark is for the rest. You don't have to put points. You can put points in any lower column. But what that means is I'm buying 2 research points here, which is my maximum. So I've got 3 German, 2 Italian, that's 5. An intelligence, make it 6. And an advanced point, make it 7. Now the advanced point is special. I can put that anywhere in the category, and, you know, because it's got its own limitations, it can kind of take one of my white box options. So since I only have 7, 3 of my options are going to be white box. The other 4 could actually go higher up, but one of those white boxes could be my freebie, as it were, the advanced technology for the Axis. And I am, you know, you can see I'm running up against the bar here because I've had 3 turns of research, right? So that's not surprising. So now I have to be a little bit more careful how I allocate my points, which is to say at least 3 of them have to end up going in the white box, one of which is my advanced technology, but none of that's advanced far enough to be in the gray boxes yet. Okay, so remember that all these selections for construction, etc., are kind of secret and done, you know, simultaneously. Well, the Axis as a whole put in an additional military unit so that they have the bonus over the French again. They already had a bonus here. It would take them a couple more counters to improve their tank and special units. They put in an extra airplane The Italians mobilized an airplane, the Germans mobilized the infantry. They went on a shipbuilding spree, part of which is because of German ships all got accelerated to space at no cost. So the Germans were able to launch a couple of ships. The Italians didn't have a whole hell of a lot of money, so they didn't really want to move their ships forward. So these guys go into next turn to be available. But we've got that limited down to a -1, and the Allies aren't aware that the Axis is doing this in this turn. Now, I made a die roll to see, hey, because it does seem like, wow, we really ought to be looking at Ethiopia and the Rhineland at some point with the Axis powers. If I had guessed correctly and maybe modified and bought my own military units in time, maybe I would be able to prevent this. But the problem is for the Allies to buy military units is cutting into their income. It is for the Axis as well. But if the Axis doesn't buy them at the same time, the Axis can kind of sit back for quite a while before they've made a second aggression each, or for either power, with no worries whatsoever. They can just start building up their tech and their research. So it's actually pretty unlikely that the Allies are going to, guess right on this kind of matter. So the Axis probably will be able to get this kind of boost, and they got themselves a couple of balance of power bumps off of what they've got here, which means we have a pretty good chance of going forward. Especially Germany has an extra support point, etc. So, and remember, Ethiopia is a fixed value. So you can look at Ethiopia and say, I can attack or I cannot. You can look and see if the Allies can respond. So that's always kind of cool. So, yeah, we're kind of hoping for it at this point. It's possible that the Allies will try to put some pressure about the Rhineland to prevent Germany from moving forward this turn if they think they can. They do have diplomatic points they can play in there. Right now, those flags help the Germans move in. If there's a lot of pro-German sentiment in the country, so, that's what happens with the Anschluss and with the absorption of the Rhineland, is there's enough pro-German intention in place that it's easy to conquer these things without, making it look like an act of overt aggression the way Czechoslovakia, say, did. Russia can't build any military units again, so they're kind of, unable to really advance their cause. Somebody mentioned, basically the purges make Russia be out of the game for almost the entire game. I don't really mind that, but yeah, you can see where if you're playing Russia alone, that could be an unpleasant position to be in. And if there's 3 or more players, somebody's playing Russia alone. I'm working on the diplomacy. I've already placed the common turn into Poland. Poland's kind of hard for anyone to hold on to. Well, anything next to Russia is hard. Anything that doesn't, that the Axis doesn't control next to Russia is hard to keep a hold on. I'm looking at this British diplomatic initiative, though. This is their event. Britain may place 1 additional diplomatic counter. Now, your limitation to how many diplomatic counters is your activity chits, and more specifically the ones you want to buy. And your limitation on a per country basis is 1 chit per country, but it doesn't say an additional one in a specific country or anything like that, and that would be pretty obvious. I don't know what to do with that. The only thing I can think of that it does is maybe I get to borrow 1 of these counters and buy that in addition if I want to go on a major diplomatic offensive. That doesn't sound terribly like a great advantage, but as we get later in the game, maybe the activity counters become more of a valued commodity. I almost always have some extras. Germany's actually running down. They're planning on buying this 3.1, and this 1.1 is, well, they're not going to buy that. But the 3.1, I don't remember where they're putting it because I had to make that decision. They're going into the Rhineland with their 0, actually. So the 3.1, I think, is going to go into someplace like Romania. The reason it's a 3.1 is I didn't save myself a 2-point counter. I used those up kind of foolishly, buying units, this, that, and the other. Everybody bought their points, and now I just resolved them as usual. The Brits had a 2-point gain over in Ireland, which is going to get them an economic penetration there. or whatever you want to say. They call them trade pacts in this. I'll put that there. One of the more interesting, the Germans actually threw their military into the Rhineland because now they have support point and the balance of power in their favor, so they're able to do that. I don't think the Italians were able to use their military. You got to flip through this and continuously be looking everything up. Eventually, maybe you'll remember some things. Yeah, if you have a better brain than I do, everything. But it's not a game that's well designed for figuring out, yeah, only in a civil war, that's what I thought, like the Brits, for being able to figure out what the full effect, you know. To hold the whole game in your head is very, very difficult. It's not that complex a game, but it's a game filled with complex little modifiers. So here we get the Belgians back. For the Germans, well, they made it look like they really went big in the Rhineland. They didn't go all that big. They spent their military counter, no doubt. I don't know why I'm putting these over there instead of in the discards, except that I don't think there's any effect. But that does give us a point, an extra point against the Rhineland. Pushing it, we're almost guaranteed it, I believe. We'll see. Italy grabs themselves Albania. Additional money, you know. That's always a good thing. You want to build your economic base up, your little engine for any euro like this, right? Oh, we went big in Romania. And that was kind of the surprise move for the Axis. And the Germans, I'm doing the pulsing better on these. So the Germans held their Romanian pick until everyone else went. And then they could see, yeah, I can go in there indeed. Nobody's going to stop me. The Russians, okay, so they take a German away. That's one. And then for the second one, they now have a flag here. And I think that means we're going to see the anti-Comintern moving into Turkey again. And the Russians have so much trouble with diplomacy. Unless they put a huge effort into it, it's just not going to work. The French saw that the anti-Comintern was in there, so they knew to put a 2-point counter in. Remember, that has to be placed first, and they get themselves an access into Poland. And we get this flag. Now, I think something comes of this. I think beyond the trade pact, there's another, because I looked this up not long ago, but this is the kind of thing you have to remember, or else constantly check this list of all the pieces to see, do any of them apply, right? So unfortunately, you know, the piece that's here isn't explained there, but here it's counters for Finland, Poland, Romania, and Turkey are placed to indicate Axis or Allied trade pacts or Poland-only flags in these minor countries. So I think the fact that we got a trade pact means we get a second Poland flag, if there is one. What are these? Yeah. So now Russia has a further garrison problem here, working against them. Now, whatever this is, they have. I just don't have a marker for that. There should be a little garrison research result or something like that. So I'm gonna put a Russian marker to help remind me that that's there. And this one, I don't remember what this one's for. You know, I just don't remember. I have to go look up the garrison rules to see what those affect. Did I catch everything? No, there's some British up here. 0, but I did slip one in up in Sweden. Now, maybe I should be worrying because I think there are some flags that I didn't catch there. I remember Poland because Poland's important, but Finland, Romania, and Turkey. Romania now has one. So we need a little Romanian flag too. And that's, again, a penalty against the Russians. And they've got some severe problems. Now, this I don't think counts against garrison requirements, but it counts against their support total or something. This whole chart is, their own little world, and I just don't have a great grasp on it. But that means we go back down to, hey, I didn't remember to do any of the diplomatic events. Crap. So, Romania, Germany should have been paying attention. They don't get all their points in there, so they actually put in the right amount. Italy gets a Bulgarian marker. I was planning on going into Bulgaria, actually. But again, trying to do this, I forgot what my events were and what I did. I got Albania, so that's just as good, I guess. Or something. Useless, and everything else has already been played, which means we move on to here. And this, if you're focusing and sitting at the table playing the game and you got the card in front of you, it's going to be a little easier than if you walk away and come back to the game 4 or 5 times each turn. But that's just the nature of my playthroughs. About those natures is, if some rule kind of nags at the back of my head, eventually I end up looking it up like this. Hey, maybe I'm playing it wrong, maybe I'm not. Who cares, really? I mean, it'll have an effect, but it is a game, and I should be playing it for enjoyment. I had another issue that was along those lines. I don't remember what it was specifically, but it came to my head, and then I came back here to discuss it, and it's already slipped away, so I can't even look it up. This one I'll probably look up because it has been nagging me a little bit for a while. Oh, I know which one. So, Russia has significant support level decreases. Somehow that affects their tile effects. I've already looked up under the tiles where it tells you can have 21 of these, and that, I think, support levels that are negative reduce that value. I have not yet found in the rules where those support levels reduce that value. It's not in the tiles section, and I don't think it's in the support level section, but maybe I'm wrong. But I know there was somewhere. By the way, we're at like 10 tiles in the cup, which means the next tile drawn, 15 more, 5 of each go back in the cup. So that's always going to be replenished. But somewhere there's a statement of how many tile points you can hold. Oh, right here. A maximum of 21 tile points can be carried over to the next turn. Somewhere else that is restated, and it says, I think, that support value is the thing that reduces it. If you have negative support value, maybe it's negative income, you can't hold as many tiles. Okay. But it actually didn't say how many were reduced. So that's got to be hidden somewhere else, and that's somewhere else I have not yet found in the rules. And like I said, the rules, you can't read these rules. I mean, I've done it twice, but you can't get anything from it, not even a good idea of where things are. So the only real way to get this going is to play through it. And the only way to play through it is to read all the rules and try to find the setup information and to memorize all of that. Like all of the connections of that, so you can get it down on paper. The guy who got it down on paper, hey, I'm totally indebted to him, but he didn't capture it all at all. There are aspects that are not covered in that little cheat sheet that I used. And that's the problem. And it would be really nice if, GMT would devote some resources to say, screw it, the designer did not make a game that really is accessible to anyone who doesn't already know it. So we're going to assign a development team to make, a couple of changes to try to provide a couple of cheat sheets, etc., that'll just make this game usable to other people, because it's not that bad a game. It's kind of interesting, and it's certainly a neat setup for a world at war. Much as I gripe about some of the aspects of it, it does have its value, and One of the things it does, as part of its lack of value, is it drags GMT's name down. And that's why they should put some effort into trying to patch it. Because it is really such a subpar product based on the rulebook and everything, as it was released. And they should also say, we are never, ever going to give someone carte blanche again. We're not going to put our brand on it, because, I buy things based on, I know that GMT is a good, trustworthy company. They had, early on, maybe they weren't the strongest out there, but they have a certain standard of component quality, which is not met in A World at War. Rules quality, which I may have my issues with, but it's not met in this for certain. And, they're just throwing that all away with this game as far as I'm concerned. Okay, well, we're in the crisis phase. Let's make a quick figuring on whether the various Axis powers are going to declare a crisis. But I think they are. I think they set it up finally so they can. So taking a look at Rhineland first. Base is 0. Okay. Support levels. Germany's got 1 support level in their favor. Britain and France do not. We're not going to worry about Russia here. They're at negative support levels, and this isn't against an Eastern bloc, an Eastern power, so there's no way they can join in the war. So right now we're over at 1 in favor of the Germans. Axis European Aggression Index doesn't count for anything. Minor countries. Okay, we've got a flag in Belgium and flags trade pact in Belgium, Luxembourg. That's adjoining Rhineland. Theoretically, we've got little counters for this, but that's a point in favor of the Allies that takes away from that. Eastern neighbors, that only affects, I think, the chance of Germany being able to declare war on Russia. Flags in Russia affects the chance of Russia declaring war. I don't know which way it goes, but there's a French flag here. Maybe that supports them and cancels out the penalty to the support that Russia has. I don't know. Balance of power, we've got 2 in favor of the Axis for that. And then, support levels. We already did that. I don't know what the hell. Oh, these are lettered results, and the balance of power and support levels are then filled out over here. So maybe we forgot maybe we did the balance of power twice, right? 1 for balance of power for Germany, 1 off for 1 for support levels for Germany, 1 off because of Belgium, Luxembourg, plus 2 because we're at 2 levels in the balance of power. Hey, let's make sure that's correct. Yes, it is. And then finally, we have to consider the Rhineland itself. The Rhineland support level is going to be somewhere else. When this gets added in an aggression, it's got a base of 0. I've got 3 flags in their favor, so I've got 3 in favor of Germany. So we've got like 5 in favor of Germany. There's no way that anybody can oppose us here and cause a war. So the Allies will just let that happen. Now what happens when we do that, we'll hold off on that, but we're going to mark this like this. And it's going to be automatically successful, and nobody's going to deal with it. Now we start dealing with the Italian engagement against Ethiopia. Ethiopia's always got a 1. There's not going to be any counter draw here, so we have it completely figured. We don't have to worry. And here, we look for that other thing, and honestly, I can't do these in my head, but it looks likely. Support levels. Nobody's got any. European Aggression Index doesn't matter. Minor country, we have a base of 1 in favor of the Allies here. That's the defensive strength of Ethiopia. Although, actually, that gets added at a different point, I guess. I don't know. No, it gets added here. Germany's eastern neighbors, doesn't matter. Flags in Russia. Balance of power, that's 2. That gives us 1 over in Italy. And Support levels, we've already addressed that. So we're guaranteed an okay there. We're going to declare war or take our action in Ethiopia. Okay. Ethiopia is not going to be conquered for 3 turns. It takes the Italians 3 turns to conquer Ethiopia. Their military is busy there, so they can't use it in their counters. Germany, on the other hand, is automatically successful as long as they don't end up in a war. So I'm going to get this extra political Rhineland shit. We sweep these flags off. The Rhineland disappears. It's now part of Germany again. We get this factory. It's an idle factory. And we add that. Of course, the Rhineland territory is incorporated into Germany. You know, I've been researching Westwall, and I'm not sure maybe I haven't. I hope I haven't. I'm not sure I'm allowed to until I own Rhineland. I have not. Cool. Okay. So now there's the possibility of other things. So among other things, I looked through these, see if there's a Rhineland chit for any of these. Because it's the easiest way to look things up for me is, hey, is there a counter for it? No. Is there a Rhineland chit somewhere over here? I could probably look in the little booklet thingy. I do not see one, but I can't. We got the Sudetenland, Danzig, Austria. We do not have a chit that gives us support for taking the Rhineland. So I think that's the whole effect. Now I could actually look this up somewhere over in this battle manual and make sure that I understand what I'm supposed to get from this, because there actually may be additional effects. Germany adds an idle factory. Germany may place a military counter in Belgium, Luxembourg. We now border them. We can place research wall in West Wall. We add an activity counter. That's the one we grabbed. We draw an additional random event in the next turn. I'm not sure how to mark that, you know, because I've got, normally you would be, you know, just playing the next turn right afterwards. But I'm not going to be doing that, so I want to mark it somehow. And the Great Purge is added to the Russian deck. So we add that in here. And now we've got 3 things that can happen in any given turn. And I believe that's about it. Ethiopia will be finished up in 3 turns. Then we look up what happens there. But basically, for the most part, the Axis are going to want to take anything they can, kind of. These are more reserves. This is so confusing, having this thing below the reserves. That has caused me so much difficulty. And now, I guess we put the die here to remind me that it's going to be next turn, clean up some cards, and bang, we keep going. By the militarization of the Rhineland affecting whether or not you can do the West Wall research, you know, I'm sure it's actually spelled out in the rules at some point or another. But this is kind of the problem with this kind of rule book is, you know, all these special cases. If you're going to provide a rule book of that sort, you almost have to force the player into a player aid type of mentality. Now, this game doesn't really do that. Yes, there's the player aid of the battle manual. Hey, when I take something over, I got to find out what happened. But it's too late at that point if I've already researched the West Wall. You're assumed to know the whole rule book. You know, it ain't going to happen. Which kind of means that instead, especially if you're going to go with a rule book of this type that doesn't actually explain, you know, a lot of what's going on, it just kind of gives it as a compendium. And I don't think it's particularly like a World at War. I don't think it's particularly sparsely written because of that, in terms of it takes up as much space as a reasonably usable rulebook would. But I do think that you have to provide some kind of player aids that give you a summation of all the things that you can and can't do. So, for example, here, West Wall, there should be some notation to indicate I'm not going to be able to do that until something happens. Unfortunately, there is not. And because that's the main driving thing that would get me to do that. Likewise, there should be some sort of summation of the effect here. I've got this support effect here. This is all kind of vague, but it does give me enough of a hint to tell me, okay, I think if I'm 2 below the garrison here, that's going to be a point of support. But what's up with these things, you know? How do they work out? That looks like it's 2 more, so I think I'm 4 behind, actually. I'm not 4 behind the garrison, but no, I'm sorry, 3 behind. Because I've got these 2, which I think are positive, and these 2 are negative, 1 more negative. So I think I'm a net of 3 off. So I actually think I'm owed another penalty from this chart. I'm going to put a little marker there to indicate that, one of my generic support markers. And I'll figure out if that is indeed the case, but I suspect it is. And that means, well, what does that mean? I think that means that I net out, because I'll be off the chart here, I net out at -3, because I've got 3 negatives, a positive, and another negative over here. I'm not quite sure how to represent things with these tracks. Again, that's not well explained, but from what I've seen of people who set it up, they set up their little positives and negatives on here. So I've been trying to match that. It's not working very well, but it's not horrible. You know, it could just be a pool of these counters over here and a single number somewhere on the track to represent what they are. That would probably actually work better. I got something I drew out of the random events deck, and I got no idea what's up with it. Bulgarian revisionism threatens Greece. The Axis must support one side, Russia or the Allies, the other, EAI +1. Well, I can do the EAI. That's not hard. But what's up with this? What? I have no idea. I think this may be a Greek Civil War event. I'm going to look up in Civil War, see about the must support one side or the other, and what's up with that, but I really don't know. I'll come back with more. Germany is going to get 2 random events this turn, because they succeeded in completing one of their things. Now, they don't have to play both of these. So we're going to get a couple of points in Greece, and a Spyring effect for One Axis Intelligent Project. We get to play them both, we get that advantage, but we're only required to ever play 1 random event. Normally you only get 1 per turn. The Rhineland provides only 1 turn of these. These guys say, hey, you get 2 random events or whatever. It should say 2 turns of excess random events. You get these bonus random events as you succeed in various aggressions. So it has nothing to do with the Civil War. I don't know where Civil War events are or what they look like. I haven't gotten any yet. When I look this up, the outbreak of Civil War, they say public diplomatic, and the 5th triggering event is a public diplomatic. Okay. The 5 events have occurred. Okay, let's work our way back. It seems like it's talking about something that's already been talked about, but no. So I have no real idea of how Civil Wars get triggered. It could be anything that mentioned Greece is working towards triggering an event, in which case we've had something in Yugoslavia already. There was some kind of event that mentioned Yugoslavia. You would think the cards would actually say something, but we don't know this, right? You know, what I found for this, and maybe this is a Civil War triggering event, it sounds almost like it, but, you know, I don't know, Bulgarians threaten Greece? Not really. But what it comes down to here is we have this diplomacy, we have a type here, and then it tells you the contending alliances must support one side or the other. That's the only rule there is on it. Then there's this italics, which italics for me are kind of assigned to ignore. That's probably either, you know, an example, oh, well, I guess we need one here, or some historical fact, and it just switches off my rule reading capabilities. which are pretty limited anyway. But then they say Germany or Italy must place a diplomatic counter worth at least one, or for Romania only. Well, obviously this isn't a rule. The anti-Comintern marker in either of these, and the other side must place. Okay, so it looks like we have to do diplomacy is what it's saying. The Axis and Russia and the Allies may only place a diplomatic counter in one of the two minor countries. After Germany or Italy places a diplomatic country in one minor country, the other Axis major power may not place a diplomatic... Okay, so you can't pair up in the country. You can't support both sides with your two countries, I guess. All pretty reasonable. If they've been occupied by the Axis support the occupied country without having to put a counter in it. This would count as a civil war for one or both of Greece and Yugoslavia if they were involved in the dispute. Okay, well, there we have it. I don't know if other diplomacy events count as civil wars. So some events for Spain have no diplomatic effect other than being a civil war closer. Yeah, I have the feeling that anything that mentions a civil war applicable country gets a counter. So I'm going to put a civil war counter in Yugoslavia because I think we've had an event for Yugoslavia. You know, it would be helpful if the cards kind of had some indication of that on them. And we'll also put one in Greece, because now it really doesn't matter that I get the numbers in order, but I'm so anal retentive about this that I'm making a mess about that's affecting my organizational OCD, right? Okay, and what's going to happen here is one side is going to have to do diplomacy on Bulgaria, the other side on Greece. Okay, well, big deal, right? The Axis is probably going to try, they have first shot at it, so they're probably going to go into Bulgaria and put support in there. Really kind of funny, you know, the way they deal with the Civil War on here, the fact that this is supposed to be a Civil War card. You know, this is how the game actually copes with the possibility, the opportunity to give you any kind of clues or pointers as to something. It's right along the lines with, yeah, we're not going to bother giving you the setup for the game, you know. It's just, it boggles the mind that anyone would design a game and not have those thoughts in mind. I mean, can you imagine what the blind testers must have been like? Well, they didn't exist, obviously. But, you know, can you imagine somebody being handed this pile of crap and told, yeah, figure it out on your own? I mean, that's what I did, largely. Although, I don't know if I could have done it without this. I really don't. I don't know if I could have done it without seeing photographs of how it's set up. And I don't know how many people could. You know, I mean, I guess if you're on some special brainwave with the designer, or, of course, the real case, if you're in constant communication through his special little Yahoo group, and, you know, you're constantly getting fed the information about the game. But yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, GMT should never allow a situation where they don't have, you know, some oversight of the project. This is goofy. The economic facet of the turn was actually pretty complicated this time. For one thing, Britain decided, a number of countries did, to convert civilian factory into a military factory. The problem with Britain doing it is they lose this, and it's gone forever. This shit is not going to be available to them again. They can't convert back to a non-war footing. They really do need to have a bigger military, though, and they kind of want to hit here. Now, the problem is they can't really hit here. Giving up the 2-point counter is fine. The next step they give up, they're giving up their research counter, and they can't afford to do that. And another factor is once you're fully mobilized, you don't have any money. You're not going to be diplomatizing anymore. You're not going to be, you're not going to have points to expend on building up your navy, etc. So you really kind of want to be fully mobilized just before you hit the war, right? But anyway, what else? France is the first to have succeeded in a research project due to the card they had. They got a covert operations result. Now that's placed here in Austria, and it's going to provide a diplomacy advantage there until it's eliminated. So we're going to be countering diplomacy that goes into Austria and being able to maybe try to prevent the Anschluss that way. We also saw a lot of shipbuilding. The Germans built a ship. They can only lay down one per turn because they don't want to place this. When they place this, that causes some effects. I don't know if it's a support level or what, but it has some effect on Britain because Britain gets worried about Germany's navy. Italy laid down 2 ships. No, they pushed 2 ships forward. Britain actually laid down 3 separate of these battle cruisers. You could say, well, battle cruisers, shitty, crappy ships. Yeah, they are, but they still count towards the balance of power, and they'll be, counters in the game when we get to a world at war. You got this weird kind of dichotomy where you're choosing between. So if you were playing just Gathering Storm, you would have a much, much easier grasp on, okay, well, how do I optimize my points against my opponent? Yeah, there's some secret selection, etc. But how do I actually get the edge on them? So, for example, the Germans actually mobilized some ground troops, and now they're getting close to getting the up to +2 here. France also laid down a ship. The Russians mobilized 2 ground units. That matches this. And I notice a problem immediately. My Russian garrison matching this. Okay, that's great. Ooh, I think I'm supposed to have some effect on those. I think I'm behind in the garrison because of all this crap. Oh, shit. my support level is going to be at -3 forever if that's the case. But here's the problem. I need these counters to mark this. Well, those counters are my active units counters. I guess what I can do is I can clear off my active units. I only have enough military counters to cover all the potential active units. So what I'm guessing is active units that are comprising the garrison don't show up in the active units row because, quite simply, I don't have enough here to cover everything. Again, not made clear, no idea how to actually use these player aids. So yeah, I do have to look into this and see why these 2 Axis units are there. That may have been... No. Who knows? It's the net of these suckers, the bonuses here. As long as those bonuses are pro-Axis, I have to cover them. I'm not sure if I have to cover them if I get a bonus if they're negative, if that means like my Japanese garrison's less required, because what it says is the net Axis armor, infantry, and air balance of power advantages. Okay, so the way it's worded, it's not really clear, but I would guess that the Russians do not get to reduce their Japanese garrison based on the fact that Germany's really, really weak. The best that they can get to is down to the Japanese garrison. Plus, of course, these seem to be a factor in the garrison. So I think I'm actually, I'm penalized for these 3. I'm actually still at -1. On my garrison chart. I should have been at -2 last time, I guess. So we'll give this. I think these are both in my favor. This is just so hard. Research and production result counter. So one is my garrison research, whatever that stands for. I'm not sure what the other one was. I don't know what that other one is. Russian flags in minor countries. I have a flag over here, so that may be what it is, but I didn't start with that, and I don't think I started with any flags in minor countries. So I really don't know where that one came from. Because you start the game with that one in place, I think. I don't know. I mean, there's like a little symbol there, right? Who knows? And, you know, but we're close, so that's probably good enough. Alrighty. So the German opportunities for Anschluss disappeared here for this turn. What happened was they put in heavily in Czechoslovakia and took it out of French hands. And now they've got kind of multiple vectors they can move along, but they don't have enough support between the balance of power 2 and their 1 point here that they felt like they could go after either. When I net it out, the 2 flags I have in Austria cancel Austria. Oh, maybe I do. The 2 flags I have in Austria cancel out the Austrian 2 points. They get a counter draw, and I've got a 3-point advantage on England or France. Now, England has, and I should have this upside down really, to note that the Germans aren't aware of it. They have a secret event, and I'm just tracking it on the regular track. So Germany's not aware that England's actually a little hosed in terms of being able to do anything at this point in the game. So what that means is we actually have a -2 on Austria that we know about. Right? Or is it a -3? A -3 on Austria that we know about. So the requirement to declare war, the Allied requirement, as I said, isn't well defined. They left something out with the threshold. But I think the Russian, no, actually this is, maybe the threshold is specified here that's required. Or maybe it's not. Somewhere under the British, the Allied rules is German declaration of war on Russia. They can retaliate if they meet their requirements. Okay, so somewhere I found something that said what the threshold comes out to. And what I'm not curious about is, can I declare war if I'm at 0, or do I have to be a +1? Because on a worst case pick, the Germans think that the Allies could declare war on them. And if they have, the French have the Brits have a hidden event still that they have not exposed. The French had to expose their diplomatic event during the diplomatic phase. Ooh, I forgot about this event. Oh, we got 2 points in Greece that we didn't count. There goes that British, the British set up a trade thing, they thought, in Greece, responding to the Bulgarian-Greece event, which the Italians also set up against, but yeah, there was a big penalty there that I forgot about because there's an extra card. So I got to try to figure out what the threshold situation is. I don't remember where. I found it for the Russians and no one else. Yeah, the Russians have a requirement here that lists that they must meet the threshold at +1. And no one else has any statement of threshold values that I've seen. So I'm assuming that's the general case. So now, my 2 flags cancel out the 2 points base for Austria. And then the 3 balance of power cancel out the maximum possible check for Austria. I'm going to go for it. Now, the Allies don't see anything that helps them here. In fact, they have something that hinders them, so the Brits know that they can't stand up to it. They know that their best chance is a 0, so it doesn't really matter. I do get to draw one of these. I don't know if I did this for the Rhineland. I should have. It really only affects when you replenish the cup, but it might affect some of the odds there. And now we have the Anschluss having taken place, which means all these go away. I don't know what to do with my trade pact, and we're going to get a little Austrian counter. These can only be used in diplomacy from what I can tell. I get a factory, and this is going to be a military factory, so it actually increases my support. And I get a mobilization event, which I have to remember to grab. And I guess this is useless. I don't know. Let me see if there's any rules on it getting moved, but I would guess the disappearance of Austria kills that covert cell, which is really a shame. That's what the French put it there for, was this hope to destroy the German chance of holding that. But let's see, 3 points. The Germans put their military in. Why did I go in there? That's my question. 3 points should have destroyed. I think I had, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But these things aren't very capable if they're being used. And yeah, I got to do my new forces, and I guess I get some victory points, if we're tracking that. And then we move on to the next turn. The Italians are still in the middle of their war with Ethiopia. That's not over till the end of the fall turn. Germany still had an idle factory, which they pushed into play. Their decision becomes harder next turn. They probably will push this one into militarization, because that just takes one of their activity counters away. And I'm not finding myself really feeling terribly hampered with Germany's activity counters. Italy's maybe. They're sitting on $3 worth of them for their diplomacy round, and that's it. Britain, Italy, France, none of these converted their civilian factories over, because doing so means they lose their research chit. And at this stage in the game, it strikes me that continuing research is more important than building up a big army. But what that means is I'm not going to be mobilizing as many units, so I'm kind of limited to my reserves, and I have to pay money for the things I've got mobilized because they're not covered by the military factories. That's probably fine for Britain. France and Italy have a little bit more difficulty economically. We got to look at this chart. What is this? Okay, the Germans built another tank. That doesn't affect their value. This doesn't change. But here we're down to -2 because of the British research that's in place. And maybe not. I think I forgot a battleship research that the Italians have there. So we'll put that back down to -1. And you really do have to get these correct. If you don't, you're going to be screwed over. So we cancel out, and we end up only at a +1 balance of power, which means the Germans are not going to be able to use 2 military tokens. They've built up their support level and had a random event to help them, where they thought they were going to be able to do that. They built armor as well, but couldn't convince the Italians to come in on that. The fact that the air got canceled out, they would have been better off building their airplane than their armor. They would have maintained it then, and would have had 2 military tokens to play for the turn, which would have given them more diplomatic power, make it more likely that they can take Czechoslovakia. Oh well. Some ships laid down. The French laid down a battleship. The Italians laid down a big 4-point battleship. Expensive to do, but that's going to get them the jump on the battleship race. That doesn't count until you start making advanced battleships. And of course, once you get them, they're going to have an effect in a world at war as well. So we're pushing over to the diplomatic phase. We have some requirements there. Technology-wise, a lot of tech is starting to develop here for whatever it means. And it's kind of weird because the game kind of handles everything as special cases. So for example, Maginot Line, when that becomes available, that becomes a support value for the French. But most tech ends up adding to the balance of power. It's just, it's just so many different little pieces that all work differently, so that you can never really get used to a systematic way of coping with the game. And then I see things like this, and I think, hey, is that the shipbuilding chart? Is that some kind of bonus for getting shipbuilding? Because there isn't, for the Allies, anything that triggers. Well, if I had looked on the chart, I would have seen economic preparation gets that bonus when it's fully developed. Anyway, knowing what goes where on all your little charts and everything, and especially since there's no, no support in the rules and no support in the player aids to help you, remind you of that. Outside of, there's this thing where if you see a counter, you don't know what it is, and this is what I did with this counter. I don't know what this is either. This weird little plane. That's the third jet research result, and that looks different, I think, from the German jet. Oh no, the Germans can't get their jets that high, I guess. Whatever. I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, that's it for now. We push further forward into this turn. Wow, I ought to be loading this one up. I forgot the Germans got I think that's an espionage result, and they're going to put that into research spying, which means that, and yeah, there's 4 or 5 different, 1, 2, 3 normal types of espionage. There's the code breaking, and then some other things that fit under intelligence that are useful as well. I guess the feeling with this is they're putting that under the land military, the ground forces in England. Now, England may not be the most interesting to look at for that, but it allows me 2 things. One, it's going to allow me to peek at the British research in that. And I don't think they'll get to see the French-specific research, but they'll get to see all the other those are Navy. They won't get to see the Maginot or the armor, I don't think. But they'll get to see all the other things that are British sort of ground military research. And in particular, that's interesting to me, just to see what they're up to. It might not be the most interesting category. Airplanes probably is the more interesting category. But I really want to get my armor up to maxed out, or close to it, and I'm afraid the war is going to start early because we're going really heavy on diplomacy here. We've got a heavy push to try to get into Czechoslovakia, and I'll flip these and resolve them, but you can see there's a lot of dip markers on the board, and Italy pretty soon succeeds in Ethiopia, so they might be available for a move against something like Yugoslavia just to grab it. That's going to, if we conquer Yugoslavia, that changes the map at the starting point of the World at War map. There are some negative effects to this. Now, we're playing this as a 5-player game in the sense that Italy and Germany aren't necessarily fully cooperating. There's some strong negative effects to Italy having allies or conquests. When in the old Third Reich, there was good reason not to go marching into Yugoslavia with the Italians, for example, unless the Germans are going to help them. For the simple fact that you really don't want Italy to be the guy who gets those BRPs added to them. However, with the research, with some of the additional functions in this game, the ability to build up your force pool, etc., I think in a World at War, it might not be quite as bad a thing to allow the Italians to kind of do well. And, well, the Italian players like, hey, look, I'm kicking ass everywhere. This is great. Unless I screwed something up, and I owe a number of countries a buck, I'm just going to give them a single, even if they maybe couldn't have taken a single. There's an EAI or something effect. When I did the Anschluss, support for Germany, France, and Britain all increased. So they each got a buck. It doesn't really affect anything to do with, how likely I am to succeed in Czechoslovakia. It does have something to do with how likely Italy would succeed in something, because people are in kind of a position to stomp, but they actually can't declare war on Italy, I don't believe, because Germany's in the lead. Although maybe they can over an aggression, so I'd have to check that. It's not possible right now because I'm still in Ethiopia. So now I'm kind of looking at Czechoslovakia, and I've got kind of two options with Czechoslovakia. I can either demand the Sudetenland, or I could demand all of Czechoslovakia at once. And I'm not quite sure what the advantage of demanding the Sudetenland is. I think I have to go up against the entire resistance factor of Czechoslovakia. There are some potential bonuses. I get an extra random event if I do Sudetenland. But, you know, why worry about that? And I'm really just not sure what's going on. One factor that does affect the chance of war, though, is the European Aggression Index is up 1 forever because of Austria. Each time you take something other than like the Rhineland or Ethiopia, I guess, these things get marked with permanent. Now wait, subsequent second aggression, the British support level is increased by 1. Ooh. Oh, we got some more. So Britain has a permanent, and I'm not sure what to use with these counters. It's funny because there's an additional, like, there's this example of play that's online, and I guess somewhat official. They use different record sheets. Maybe better ones than the game was published with. Who knows? But, you know, it just shows that, like, within a few months of when the game was actually published, a few clever people have been able to figure out ways of publishing a better game, at least from their standpoint. What I looked at, it looked like it might have been clearer and more a better design overall, but who knows? And it's just, I'm really worried, even among the real fans, there seems to have been an insularity to this design process that didn't open it up to, you know, hey, couldn't this have been done a little better? Anyway, I'm trying to figure out if there's any reason why I'd want to go for Sudetenland instead. But here I've got to give the French. Okay, and now I can put points in Anglo-French cooperation. Didn't know that I couldn't. Luckily, I haven't done that yet. You know, there's nothing on the research chart sheet that shows that. There's probably something in the rules. But now I have to try to figure out what's going on. So essentially, these guys have an extra support level. I'm not sure how to mark that. They don't really give an indication except to put a little British flag, which probably is not the thing. So I don't know. These I'm using as temporary, so I kind of want something that applies, and I don't have a counter that I see that's going to increase that support. I could use these generics, but again, these have tended to be temporaries for me. But I'll use these. Okay, so those support levels are getting pretty high. I may not be able to go into Czechoslovakia safely. If I'm right about the numbers, even for Sudetenland, it's going to cost me 4, or it's a base of 4. Bring that to 5 for the effect. 4, 0. 0 sounds good, right? Yeah, except there's 2 in Britain and 3 over in France. So I think we're pretty close to starting a war if we go in at this point. So we probably want to hold off and build up to a point where we have more support than them again. Let's figure the numbers. I am at base number, base number is, I've got like 4 for the Germans. Make it 5. 4, 5, 1. I don't see any reason why I want to demand the Sudetenland first. So now I'm at 1 in my favor. That's not terribly good. I think I'm at 1 in my favor. That's not terribly good because I'm drawing a counter, right? But on top of that, the Allies have some points as well, right? So I can look at the French and say, that brings it down, I don't know which way I'm going. 4, okay, -4, -5, -1, dink. So I'm at -1 right now. That's in my favor. In addition to that, I have trade pacts next door in 2. That puts me down to -3. You don't get to count Austria though, at least as far as I can tell. -3 means the French get me up to 0. France can declare war on me if I draw any number. So I don't think I can go into Czechoslovakia, but the diplomatic pressure I put in got me a flag in there. That's useful. The pressure I put in Poland kept the French from getting a flag there. So we've just been able to grind enough money out to get some advantages there. Plus, our control over events, we've been getting positive events, so things have been swinging in that direction as well. So this actually looks pretty good overall to us right now. But we're not quite there. So we're not going to make any additional demands, and we're going to push the turn forward. And we got some new units coming into the reserves there. And I'll send this one up.